Humanity Chats with Margie Marsh. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Hey. Well, hey everybody, how are you doing tonight? This is Humanity Chats with Margie Marsh. Tonight we have author Michel Stone, the author of Iguana Tree, The Iguana Tree, and Border Child with us. We're going to talk about how to broaden our lens. And so I'm really excited about this talk. I want to learn from Michel, and I am curious what she's going to talk about. Before we get to discussing our topic for today, I just wanted to give a shout out today to the Supreme Court decision, the DACA decision. Yay! Thank you. I was very impressed. And I was especially impressed with Justice Sotomayor and how she stood up and how she spoke up. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to Justice Roberts for being technical. Well, and another big thing happened this week, LGBTQ. Thank you. It looks like it's been a big week of events, and together, let's make a better world. So at this time, I'm going to bring Michel into our chat room, give her a round of applause. And she is going beyond her comfort zone. And so, Michel, here you are. Michel.
Margie, I'm always comfortable with you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you. Guys, this is Humanity Chats with Margie, and we do this on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. We just get together and we talk about everyday issues. And we don't intend to impose our opinions on anyone. We're just having a conversation. We try to identify some issues, and then we come up with solutions. And we hope that you're going to enjoy your time with us. And what do I even say? I don't know. Yeah, let's go, Michel. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience here?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think my mic was muted until about a second ago, so apologize for that. I am Michel Stone. I'm a mom. I'm a writer. I've published a couple of novels, as Margie said, working on my third one. Done a couple of book tours, and now just keeping it close to home, working on this third one and trying to figure out this crazy world we're all living in and doing the best I can.
Well, that's great. Famous author who's been on book tours and worked on novels. I mean, you have written about some pretty important stuff. Your books, The Iguana Tree and Border Child. I think, let me try and bring up your book so that our viewers can actually see it. Hold on. This thing takes a lot of okay, so your first book is The Iguana Tree, right?
Yes, that's right. The Iguana Tree was published in 2012 by Pebble Press, right in Spartanburg. They do a fabulous job, and I know you know that as a board member of that press.
Yes.
And yeah, Margie and I were on that board together, actually. And my second novel, Border Child, came out in 2017, published by Nan Talese at Doubleday.
Well, yes. Let me pull up Border Child, guys. The Iguana Tree, published by Huff City Press, is available locally in Spartanburg, South Carolina, at Huff City Bookshop, but it's at all independent bookstores. You can find it online, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and I guess it's a big deal today with the DACA ruling, knowing that Michel's story is. Would you want to tell us a little bit more about your story?
Yeah, sure. So, the Iguana Tree is a story of a family in Mexico, and it's a father, a mother, and a small child. And the father, Hector, decides to cross into the United States. He's undocumented, in hopes of pursuing the American dream, of creating a better life for his family. Not really aware that there were a lot of pitfalls and a lot of problems that he could face. And ultimately, he finds a job on a farm in South Carolina
Yeah.
And because of a series of events that happened back in his village, his
Mhm.
wife, rather than waiting on Hector to earn enough money to find a reputable coyote to help her get across,
Yes.
she hires her own coyote, and um, the results are cause irreparable changes to their lives. Some really hard things happen. And I tell you, people often ask me how I came to write a story about that. Clearly, I am a white American. I was born and raised in South Carolina, lived here just about my whole life. Um,
Mhm.
but I tell you, Margie, that story came from a simple human interaction. Down at the coast of South Carolina, I met a young family. Um, they were Mexican. We started chatting, and within a few minutes of our talking, they confided to me that they were undocumented, and we just really we struck up this friendship. They had a small child, as did I at the time, and I left them that day.
Yes.
Really grateful for having the opportunity to have met them, and I could tell that we hit it off. We were friends, but their story haunted me because the day I met them, when they had their little son with them, and they explained that the man came first. He got a job for a company here, and when his work visa expired, he just stayed. And then
Okay.
he told me that his wife came later by swimming the Rio Grande with a group of men in the middle of the night. So
Mhm.
so I said, oh, well, then I assume your child was born here.
Mhm.
They explained, no, their child was born in Mexico. So I didn't understand how they could have gotten the child here.
Mhm.
And they explained that they handed their child off to a coyote who specialized in crossing with babies, and they got their child back
Okay.
on the American side of the border.
Mhm.
And I didn't judge them for this. I hadn't. My interaction with them was nothing but very positive. We became friends. We are still very good friends. Uh,
Okay.
but I left them haunted by that story as a mom and as a human, wondering um, what would it take for me to want to leave the only place I've ever known, to go somewhere I'd never been, and
Mhm.
what sacrifices our parents anywhere across the globe
Mhm.
will make for their children. And that really spurred my interest in this subject. It wasn't so much about immigration or the border as it was that human connection.
Okay. 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 Well, that's interesting to know. Now, your second book, Border Child, is kind of a follow up on what happened with Hector and his family. Would you wanna elaborate on Border Child as well?
Yeah, so that book, I don't really call it a sequel, but it picks up on
Okay.
Hector and Lilia's story a few
Mhm.
years later.
Mhm.
They are back in Mexico when this story begins, and they have they receive a clue. They have well, I don't want to give too much away, but it's sort of a again, it's a story of parental love and hope,
Okay.
and what parents will do, and the sacrifices parents anywhere really will make for their children, and for love and for hope.
Mm. Mm. Well, it sounds like it's a heartfelt story. I've actually read both of your books, and I did enjoy the contents. Thank you for writing those books, and so I'm pretty sure that you followed the events of today, and you're pretty excited about the Dakaroo.
I am. You know, I when I was on book tour, I had the great privilege of meeting so many DACA recipients when I would
Mhm.
speak to high schools or on college campuses, and you know, it's not. There are things these young people have to do, you know, hoops they have to jump through, checking in
Mhm.
with the government, fees they have to pay, they have to be full-time students, they have to, you know, there are things they do in order to receive DACA.
Yeah.
And um, everyone I met was so um, interested in talking to me about these books and telling me their stories. And my goodness, I think of you, Margie, being a naturalized citizen, and what you had to go through coming from Ghana, and now you're a U.S. citizen. And I bet if well, actually, I did this. I pulled up what it took for you to become a U.S. citizen, and I guarantee I don't know that I could have passed that test. I mean, the questions that you have to know about our country and our history and our government. I wish we still taught civics in school, because I think there are a lot of young people in the U.S. who don't appreciate or know all those things that you and so many like you had to know to get here. And it does my heart good to know you and your love for this country. And it was the same way when I met these DACA kids. They were so grateful to be here. The sacrifices that loved ones had made to get them here, that I'm a big fan of DACA, and I was very, very happy today with the Supreme Court's ruling.
Well, thank you, Michelle. When I was going to do my test for my citizenship, I had to put the CD in the car, and everywhere I drove, I was learning the U.S. history. Then I had my kid quiz me, because I didn't have that much of a retentive memory. So, and then I aced the test. And the day that I became a citizen, I was so proud. I stood in front of the crowd. They asked who wanted to lead with a Pledge of Allegiance. My hand shot up, and I was there. I was wearing my red, white, and blue.
I have no doubt.
Yes, and my friend Loretta had given me earrings to match, like USA jewelry and stuff. I had a necklace that said USA. I was so full of it. And so I stood there. I was so brave, and my family, they probably were thinking, "Oh God,
they were proud of you, and that enthusiasm and that love and that energy is what you bring to everything you do. It's why everybody loves you, Margie. And when you say about the Pledge of Allegiance, I think our mutual friend Betsy Fleming, former president of Converse College. She and I were just having a conversation a couple of days ago, and she was just feeling distraught about a lot of things happening in our country. And one thing she and I talked about was the Pledge of Allegiance. We grow up saying it every day in school, and there's a line: liberty and justice for all.
Yes.
Period. There is no qualifier. There is no liberty for these and justice for those. We say that pledge every day from the time we are little bitty children, and we pledge liberty and justice for all. And if you take that seriously, then that should dictate the lens through which you see the world, right? I was just telling you, when you asked me to do this with you, I love you and I would do anything you ever ask of me. And I didn't hesitate. I said yes. But then I'll tell you, George Floyd got killed, and our world sort of imploded even more after it already was with COVID. And I honestly had a very unusual nervousness about talking to you. Not you, Margie, but me, Michelle. Like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I offend somebody? What if somebody misinterprets what I say? Or what if I actually do say something that's hurtful to someone? I mean, and so I texted you. I mean, just full disclosure, I texted you, Margie, and I said, you know what, can we postpone this? I'm just not feeling comfortable right now. And you were so kind and gracious, as you always are. And then I felt ashamed of myself and disappointed. And I called you back and I said, I've got to explain why I said I didn't want to do this. And then you and I ended up talking for 20 minutes, just like good friends do. And it was so comfortable and wonderful. And I realized that's all this is. This is two friends talking. And really, that is what this is all about, Margie. if we can talk to the people we know who are in our circles, or maybe we know them from school, or maybe a board, or maybe a club, or maybe a neighborhood, maybe we see the same person in the grocery store. If you can have that conversation, it's not scary, it's familiar. You know, I'm thinking of this right now. When I was on book tour, there was often a quote I would give from Mother Teresa. And she said, if I look at the mass, I will never act. But if I look at the one, I will. And I think that's just, sometimes when we look at what's going on in our country, we feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
We feel a disconnect. We almost feel paralyzed. But if you can just start with one conversation and start on common ground with one friend, then that can expand. And I think if you speak to anybody with an open heart and an open mind, and they know you are trying to understand,
Yes.
that's where real change starts.
Yes.
So to me, in terms of broadening one's lens, it's the beginning of how we do it.
I hear you, Michelle. I hear you, and I know when you sent that text message, I thought to myself, "Oh no, Michelle's got to do this. This is the time." And you would have thought that I spoke to you through the phone or telepathic. I was, I don't know what happened, but then you called me back and said, "Hey, Margie, this is the time for me to step up and be a leader."
I did say that.
And then, when I asked you what you wanted to talk about, you said you wanted to let people know how to see the world through their neighbor's eyes and how to broaden their lens. I think this was supposed to happen because you to have written the Iguana tree for the child, and for this decision to have happened today of all days that you were scheduled to come on this show. I just think that it's really important for us to come together and share ideas and see where we're coming from. I mean, to tell you the truth, when you said to broaden my lens, I went beyond my comfort zone. I don't like watching Fox News. Guys, this is full disclosure. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I don't watch much TV. And I don't like watching MSNBC. I think MSNBC is a little bit skewed, and so is Fox. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if everybody holds those opinions. But all week, as I was preparing to talk to you, I listened to Fox News. I was broadening my lens. I wanted to know what other people thought. And I was surprised that Fox News actually had some facts that were true. But then when it came to explaining the facts, I just thought that there was some bias over there. But, if you're pandering to who is listening to you, you probably want to make sure that your listeners stay on your channel. And so you might tell them more of what they want to hear. What are your thoughts, Michelle, when it comes to listening to the different news stations and how it informs our opinion?
I am so glad you asked. I think one of the biggest crises in America right now is confirmation bias, meaning we get in our echo chambers and we get on our Facebook, we get on our social media, and we surround ourselves with people whose opinions are exactly like our own. And then we just bat around our thoughts back and forth like a pinball among people who feel like we do. Same thing. If you only watch, only watch Fox, only watch CNN,
MSNBC.
Yeah, there's others, but even on a smaller or a different. I think of Facebook. I think it can be toxic because depending on what your Facebook feed is, it's all you're seeing. And I actually was talking to a physician about. I just had my annual checkup a couple weeks ago, and he and I were talking about this. And he said, "Do you remember a few years ago, Michelle, when everybody was talking about oh gosh, the corn sugar, like what do you call it? The high fructose corn syrup. And
Okay.
everybody's saying, oh, this is so bad for us. You don't want to eat or drink anything with the high fructose corn syrup. We have this obesity epidemic going on. And and he said, you know what? I feel that way about confirmation bias, that we are all getting in our trenches and surrounding ourselves with folks who feel exactly like we do. And our lens is about that big, and we are not interested at all in hearing someone with a different opinion talk and considering they might be right, whether they are to the right of us or the left of us. And that is a shame. That is a shame that we can't have honest discourse and understand that someone who looks different from us, who may have voted differently than us in the last election, who may live in a different neighborhood, who may have a completely different faith, who may have a whole lot more money or a lot less money in the bank, that they actually can teach us and contribute something to us. And I feel like that is an epidemic in this country right now, is that we just jump in our echo chambers and don't want to step out. And I'm with you about that. I think it's a shame. I think we're limiting ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for saying this, Michelle. See, that's why it's so important to have you here on this forum. Instagram viewers, we had a technical issue, and that's why you're seeing just my face. But I hope you're hearing Michelle and you're hearing all the things that she has to say. You know, it's important to have you here on this forum because you and I may have different networks, and if the people that I hang out with or listen to are people that think just like me, what difference does it make? They're not going to learn anything new from me. But if I go out of my comfort zone and talk to others who might think differently from me, or if I talk to you and you spread the word to your network, maybe we will be able to share ideas with each other. And I should also be open to learning from you. There are some ideologies that you may have that I may not necessarily agree with. But then when you hear me out, maybe we can find a middle ground. And that's one of the issues that I faced this week, to tell you the truth. When I was listening to some of the analysis on Fox News of the shooting in Atlanta, it was described differently. And I couldn't fathom why. I couldn't fathom why that was the description. But then, if that's the only channel that you were going to listen to, or if that particular person was the only person that you were going to hear from, then your opinions will be formed because you might not have the time to go and do any additional research and think for yourself. And it doesn't just apply to Fox, it applies to the media in general. If the media feeds us what they want us to know, we're going to fall with that narrative because most of us don't have the time to go out there and be like, okay, CNN said this, let me check. What did NPR say? Okay, let me pull up this research and figure out da-di-da-di-da. We don't do that. And so it makes it harder when we decide to just stick to that one opinion.
Yes, I agree with you. A few years ago, I read an essay by Desmond Tutu called No Future Without Forgiveness, about South Africa and the end of apartheid. And in it, he referenced a philosophy called Ubuntu. Are you familiar with that? And it's basically the belief in a universal bond among all of humanity. And the philosophy says what dehumanizes me dehumanizes you. And I love that. as a novelist, I try to tap into that. I try to tap into those universal truths that illuminate how we as human beings are so much more alike than we are different. And I believe that to my core. I think whether you take the white woman in her penthouse in Manhattan, or a person in Nepal who is an untouchable living in a tiny little hut with no running water, or somebody in South Africa, or somebody in Japan. I don't care. I think a mother is a mother is a mother. Um, we are more alike than we are different. And I think that so often the media doesn't want us to get that message.
Um, thank you, Michelle. I sometimes I'm baffled by the narrative that I hear from the different media sources, and I really don't know what to do about it because um, for most people, they just stick to what they know. And so, as you're telling us that it's important for us to broaden our lens, what I hope that our viewers would do is to reach to their various networks and just hear them out. And it's also important to, I believe, learn about the history of this country. It's not all the history that is taught in schools. And, for example, tomorrow is Juneteenth, which is celebrated by African Americans. But there are lots of people who probably don't know what Juneteenth is. And so, if you familiarize yourself with that and you understand and accept the fact that, yes, slavery did happen, and this is a celebration that is important to a part of America, you would probably realize that I have to show some kind of respect or reverence to this. But if you don't know anything about it, it makes it harder for you to accept. But then, how do we let people know this? If all we're doing is word of mouth, telling our friends, how can we spread this further? What do you think? How do we do that?
And
Sorry.
then Marjorie,
Mhm.
it's I don't know the answer, but I think I go back to that Mother Teresa quote: "When I think of the mass, I don't act, but when I think of the one, I do." And all I know, to me, it comes down to this sounds so simple, but to loving your neighbor, to talking to people, to get off the social media, to have the conversations, to to read literature that is from a perspective different than your own, to read a novel set somewhere in a place where you've never been, maybe written by someone who doesn't look like you. That's a start. That's a start. You know, I today I listened the other day to your last humanity chat with Apostle Ryan, and I thought he was so wonderful, and he said so many good things. He talked about bringing your talents and your passions to the forefront to try to make change in the world, and I think it's exactly right. I think it's the little things. It's like, when you're in a position that to maybe step out and do something, it's choosing to step out and do it, even if it's uncomfortable for you. I was nervous about at first when you asked me to do this, and that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous that I was, but it's choosing to be uncomfortable. I think. I think we are getting pretty darn complacent. We're surrounding ourselves by yes men and yes women, and if we are willing to step out of our comfort zone and make those individual connections with people, it spreads. It can spread like wildfire. And maybe that sounds so naive, but I think it's true. In First Corinthians, there's this wonderful language about love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. It makes me cry. And I feel like so many people are keeping records of wrongs, and we cannot move forward without forgiveness and positive effort and love.
Love wins at the end of it all. People are keeping records of wrongs. I mean, there are people out there looking at George Floyd and looking at some of the things that he may have done in his lifetime and using that to say that why are people fighting for this cause? They don't even realize that George Floyd is a catalyst and that this is a problem that has been there, systemic has been there. So it's like, you are already mad at someone, and then somebody does something and aggravates you, and you just blow up. And that is what George Floyd's death did to a whole lot of people in this country. People watching him take his last breath, calling for his mom. Mothers everywhere were hearing that. It didn't mean that George Floyd was vindicated of all his sins or that just made him a perfect man. No, he ended up being a catalyst for a movement that was brewing, and so I really do hear you when you say that love is the answer. And I hope that our brothers and sisters, regardless of race or gender or religion, would know that, yes, truly, we have to love one another. I have some questions from our Instagram viewers. I have Mrs. DeBeast saying, how is the conversation with your children in these times? How do you let your children broaden their lenses?
That's a great question. And I think it has to do with finding the commonality among people, regardless of who George Floyd was, what his past sins were. And I'm sure there were many, because none of us are sinless, right? But he was a catalyst, and his dying under the knee of someone for 8 minutes and 45 seconds and calling for his mother should be painful for any human being on this planet to watch, because he is a human being. And so I think the conversations start there with that. Start with, what if he were my son? What if he were my brother? How would I feel about that? And I would explode. I would explode. So I think that's where the conversation starts, with humanity, with our human connectedness.
Facebook viewers, Instagram viewers, if you have any questions, don't forget, you can just type it there, and Michelle and I will find the best possible answer that we may have. I see lots of you watching on Facebook. Please shoot us your questions and your comments. Not just here for, yes, you're doing a great job, or hi, I'm glad to see you. We're here to have a discussion, and so we're open to your questions about talking to your children. Another thing too that I see, Michelle, is that sometimes we may transfer our bias to our kids, and so we should empower them with the knowledge. As I have an example from this week. My son tends to have we tend to have some different opinions when it comes to certain things. And the leaders of the Democratic Party wore the kente cloth and took a knee. And I thought that by using the kente cloth, they chose that because that is a cloth that is easily identifiable with Africa, and that the Congressional Black Caucus made that decision to honor George Floyd and the roots from which he came. Well, my son did not agree with me. He thought that it was cultural appropriation and that if the leaders wanted to respect George Floyd, then they should have worn the funeral cloth, the black or red that is traditionally worn um, for such occasions. So you see, I was open to listening to him. I did not really agree with what he was saying, but I did listen to him. And I'm thinking that maybe that's also another way of talking to our kids, because when I sat back, yes, I was really proud about the kente cloth, but when I sat back, I kind of figured out what he was saying, and I see that there are Instagram viewers that are saying they agree with him. Oh no, please don't agree with me. Agree with me. Agree with me. Don't agree with him. That would make
Mom is very happy right now.
yes, but I think that talking to our children about these things and being open about it is really helpful. We get to learn from them because the new generation has a perspective. They have a way of seeing things. What has been your experience?
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree. I'm 51 years old. I have a son who's 14. So his life experiences by the time he's turned 14 were very different than what I experienced when I was his age. So I think you hit on something really important there, is sometimes we just need to shut our mouths and sit back and listen. And the young people can teach us things we never knew that they could. So yeah, the conversation is important, but sometimes just listening is equally as important.
Yeah, listening is important, but sometimes it is hard. It is hard to listen. And Michelle, what happens when you're listening and it doesn't quite add up? You and I had a conversation earlier about, for example, Candace Owens' video and how a lot of you people in your circle shared it with you. Can you explain what the initial reaction was and what your thoughts are?
Wow, you're just going to jump right in it, aren't you, Margie? So Candace Owens, I have to admit, I had never heard of her until a few days ago.
Okay.
Um, I saw her video, and I'm just keeping it real. I watched the whole thing. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I didn't just have somebody tell me about it or read
Mm-hmm.
the comments about it. I sat down in a room by myself and watched the whole thing. And I will say, she said a lot that made sense to me. And a lot of people will be angry hearing that. She said some things that made sense to me, um, but she also said some things that I thought, this is insensitive and inflammatory. So since that, again, my lens has been broadened because the first thing I said when I finished watching that, and this is true, I didn't tell you this. The first thing I said, I went into the room where my husband was, and I said, I want to call my Black friends and I want to talk to them about this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll tell you what, that might not have been something I would have said a long, long time ago. Um, like, years ago, maybe that would have felt like off limits. But I have Black friends, you're among them, who are very, very dear to me, who I love. And I trust your opinion and I trust your judgment and I respect your life experience that has been different than mine. So when I listen to Candace Owens say what she says, and I understand um, later that there were very many in the Black community who were incensed by what she said. I want to sit and I want to close my mouth and I want to listen. And I want you to explain to me why. Not you, Margie, but in general, just people explain to me why. So I can learn. I always want to learn. I always want to understand. I mean, it's like I said from the very beginning, there's a lot I don't know. And sometimes I might put my foot in it. Okay. And when I do, I acknowledge it. But if I don't ask you to explain to me about Candace Owens from your perspective, then I won't know your perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right. And I don't know everything, and I wouldn't know, I don't have the answers to every situation. But what I know is that she was pointing out the sins of George Floyd, and
Yes.
I respect her, I respect her opinions, but the movement is not about the sins of George Floyd, as we spoke about earlier. Um, he is a catalyst for he is a catalyst for the pain that was already there. But you see, it's not just about Candice and what she said. When I listened to Fox News this week, I realized that, Fox News would bring some commentators in there and they all had their opinions. And some of them were African American, some of them were learned people from universities, and there were some who did not even believe in systemic oppression. So it really depends on the person that you're listening to, and they would give examples, but then I would hear myself asking, oh, did they forget why their black fathers were not at home? It's because they've been incarcerated because of the system. But then I felt like people were making points that um, sounded right, sounded sensible, but then there were holes in the points that they were making, the logic, the sequence of it. Something happened because of a situation, but then when they were explaining it, they left that situation out. And that is something that I feel that most people don't know, including even some black people and people of African descent. There are people in my community who sometimes lay blame because they don't think about the big picture or see, what is happening. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with Hope Blackley Logan, and we talked at length. She was pointing out the differences in healthcare because of maybe the community that somebody else may have lived in. And I said something about health insurance. We were talking about COVID-19 and the outcomes in the Black community. I said something about health insurance. Immediately, Hope jumped in and said, wait a minute. And I'm just summarizing what she said, not the exact quote. But Hope pointed out that it's more than health insurance. It's additional disparities. It's living on the other side of the tracks. It's, not having access to this. And it could be education, and it could be, so it's so much more that goes into the equation. And if we broaden our lens, as you rightly said, we will learn the bigger picture. Because if we just see things as, oh, okay, I heard Anderson Cooper say da, so that's the golden truth, then we might not know the bigger story. Or I heard Hannity say this, and so that's what I'm going to go by. We would not know. And so I guess, as you're saying, it's important for us to talk to each other. It's by talking to each other that we would get to learn from each other. Because oh, and I must say this, like you, I'm an author. And recently I had a conversation with a book club about my book, The Shimmigrants, which is based on an immigrant girl who was a maid servant and relocated to America, and her life story. Well, I was telling them about Sasha's life when she lived in Ghana, right? And then we talked about how her family used to boil stones during the famine, just to pretend that they had food that they were cooking. Well, what I didn't know was, I think, is it Woodruff somewhere here in South Carolina, they actually have a festival of I don't know if it's boiling stones. Um,
Stone soup?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
they have a stone soup festival. Here I was thinking that this was unique to Africa. No, it wasn't. So it's important to talk to other people and realize that, oh, your experience may not be as unique as you think. So, this was Dr. Kirk Neely that was explaining this to me, and I appreciated learning that. So it wasn't just an immigrant story or something that was happening in Africa, but by opening up, I actually learned that this is something that happened in the American culture. And so broadening our lens is and seeing the world from other people's eyes makes a big difference. Have you had during your book tour, have you had people asking questions about the Latino culture that you have depicted in your books?
Oh yeah, yes, a lot. And I never want to write a story set in a place I haven't been. So
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time well, I've been in Mexico, Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica, doing research for my books, as well as interviewing people there and here who are from those places. And mostly, I mean, 98% of my experience has been very positive, with readers, and with my being a Caucasian American writing that stories set, with characters, with protagonists who are not from the United States. But yeah, it's generated a lot of good conversation. Um, and back to your point about equality and equity. Yeah, until there is equality of opportunity, equality of education and healthcare, and um, pay, um, we're going to this cycle of inequality will continue. So those are all things we have to work on and do better. I just wanted to say that when you were talking about that, I couldn't agree more.
Well, be happy to know that you have a viewer who's joined from Costa Rica, Carol Centeno. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but she's watching from Costa Rica.
Oh yeah, hi Carol.
Yes, yes, yes. Now I lost my train of thought. I got so excited. We have international viewers. Yay!
Well, you know what, Margie? There is a poem that I really love, and it's very brief. And I was wondering if I could read that because I think it speaks to what we're talking about, in terms of sometimes we feel paralyzed to step out of our comfort zone, and we don't know how to begin.
Okay.
So this is a short poem called "The Real Work"
The-
by Wendell Berry. And Wendell Berry is a novelist, an essayist, a poet, but he's also a farmer, and he's from Kentucky. And this is his poem, "The Real Work." It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings.
Wow. Wow.
I think if things were really easy, everybody would do it, right? It's when we face the challenges, when we don't know what to do, that's when we have to step up, step out, and choose to do something.
Yeah. We have to step out of our comfort zones, just like you have, and choose to do something. Yes, it's really important. And I have to step out of my comfort zone as well, because I may be used to seeing things a certain way, and then maybe things that I really may not agree with, or that I would. I know that sometimes I may rub someone off wrong because of my school of thought. And so it's important for all of us to step up, and especially during these times where our country is upside down. It's time for all of us to step up. When we hear people talk about Black Lives Matter, and I can't say this enough, it doesn't mean that other lives do not matter. Um,
No, you know what? That is like saying, right now, if I walk into the Publix grocery store and I'm wearing my mask because of COVID, and someone says, "Why are you wearing that mask?" And I say, "Well, because we're in a pandemic with COVID." And they say, "Well, what about cancer? What about AIDS?" I didn't say a thing about cancer and AIDS. Just like someone saying Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean that white lives don't matter. It's just saying we're talking about Black Lives Matter, um, because that's what we're talking about right now.
yeah.
And, you know, let's talk about too, while we're talking about this, white privilege.
Yes.
Right?
So much that up. Yes.
The first time I heard that expression was a few years ago, and it bothered me, Margie. It bothered me. I thought, who are you? Not you, but in general, who are you to tell me you don't know anything about me? You don't know about the hard work I've done. You don't know what I do. You don't know what I've done to earn what I have, and the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into it, and et cetera, et cetera. But I've grown up since then, Marjorie, and I understand that white privilege does not mean that I haven't busted my tail to do things. Nobody's saying that. What they're saying is that the color of my skin was never a hindrance in my journey to get what I have or to do what I've done. And I get it now. I had an epiphany when it was explained to me. I get it. I understand what white privilege means now. But you know why? Because I had a conversation with someone who explained it to me instead of just my shutting it down and getting in my echo chamber. I wanted to understand it. And here's the other thing that I want to leave with your guests, particularly maybe some of your white listeners. Um, the Black community is telling us they hurt right now. Okay. Now, Susie over there, she might not be hurting, or Joe over there, he might be doing just fine. Or Candace Williams, Candace Owens might be rocking and rolling wherever she is, okay? I understand that. But the Black community is saying that they're hurting right now. So I have two choices. I can believe them or I cannot believe them, period, right? And I choose to say that, you know, Marjorie, we're dear friends. If you came to me and you said, Michelle, I am really hurting right now, I'm struggling with something, and then you told me all about it, would I look at you and say, oh, Margie, that's ridiculous. You're just fine. You're fine. Go on now. You're fine. No, I would never say that to you. I would listen to you and I would take your pain to heart. And then I would say, well, let's see what we can do. Let's dig in and try to fix this problem. So when the Black community is saying they're hurting, it's not one random person over there. It's not somebody, oh, well, that person's crazy. I'm not. It is a community at large who is saying they are hurting. And so I choose to believe that. And now I need to educate myself on why that is. And as a human being and Ubuntu, because what dehumanizes the Black community dehumanizes me, I need to figure out how I can do my little part to help lessen that pain.
Yeah. Wow, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you for standing up and thank you for speaking up. That the real work starts with, you know, people who feel for other people. Um, for you to be in the position that you are and to decide that you will hear people who are telling you that they're hurting means a lot. And my prayer is that people in your circle, people with your position, with your influence, would also stand up for what's right. This is a fight for equality for all. And we all know that in order to make an impact, people from the grassroots level have to work hard at it, but we also need people of influence. And so when people of influence speak up for the masses, it does make a difference. And as an author, as a community leader, I appreciate you standing up and speaking up because I know that it's probably not everybody in your circles who would agree with you. And you are probably going to get some text messages or phone calls after this conversation. But viewers, I want you to understand Humanity Chats is apolitical. We don't belong to any political party. We are just speaking as humans. I also want to give you a little background on how Humanity Chats got started. Let me find that book. I wrote a book titled Same Elephants. The book basically means we are the same. It's about 4 friends from diverse backgrounds. And with these friends, 2 of them who are Black ended up going to help out their 2 white friends, and a neighbor thought they were trespassers. And these 4 friends got together to change people's perception. They got together to try and change people from just stereotyping others. That is our call. We may be coming from different parts of the world. We may look different, but we have to stand up as one. And I'm so glad that Michel is telling us that if somebody tells us that they're hurting, we shouldn't just put that aside and say that, hey, but I'm hurting too. Especially in these times, there are people who have lost jobs. There are people who have lost family members. We have COVID-19 ravaging our nation. There is so much going on. And so it's easier to belittle somebody else's pain. But then if we come together and join hands, and maybe we're social distancing, we shouldn't literally hold hands, but but we come together, we can achieve more. And that is what humanity is advocating. I'm so glad that Michelle has lent her voice to this movement, and I'm hoping that Michelle will be able to join us again at a later time for us to follow up. You have any parting words for listeners that we're getting closer to our time limit?
Well, I just thank you for having me, Margie. I think what you're doing is so important. Um, it's like throwing a pebble in a pond, and then you never know how far those ripples will go. You are making ripples, and they're important. And I'm grateful to be a small part of that. So I thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you and for you to lend your voice. And if there are any resources out there, guys, please don't hesitate to send those resources to me so that I can share it with others. You can go on margymarge.com and just send me a message. Kim Underwood Moultrie from the city of Spartanburg actually signed in, and she said this is her first humanity chat. She has both been blessed and inspired. And she said, Michelle, the city of Spartanburg is putting together a great program where they will be painting a mural downtown Spartanburg this Saturday. And so I would ask for people to check out the City of Spartanburg website and pages and support. Come out in your mask, of course, for the Black Lives Matter mural that is going to be put up by the city. This has been great having you here with us today, Michelle. I really appreciate this. And viewers, this is Humanity Chats. We do this on Thursdays. At 7 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, tell your friends. If you missed the live session, you can always come back to the March page to watch it. You can share the chat with your friends. We are also on YouTube. Just type Margie TV, like you see in the corner. You would see our previous episodes. You can watch it, share it with your friends. If you have ideas, reach out to us. We are always open. Thank you so much for joining us. And guess next week we're going to be talking about education. We have a guest who is a graduate of Harvard Business School. She's from the south side of Chicago. She's going to be talking to us about our kids' education, getting into college, getting into grad. This is a tough time to think that our kids may be graduating and they may not even be finding jobs. So I'm very curious about what La Monica is going to share with us. I will see you at 7 p.m. Eastern next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.